Hello, everyone. My name's Joe Murphy, Marketing Manager at Sigilant. And today we're going to have some fun talking cybersecurity. Joined today by Dr. Ben Harrison. Ben runs our Security Operations Center as well as our services arm side of the business. So, Ben, thanks for joining me today. As always, I love having conversations with you, especially around cybersecurity.
Pleasure to be here, and as always, good to talk. So let's see if we can answer some questions. I think that's the point of today.
Absolutely, folks. So welcome to the Cybersecurity Q&A webinar series presented by Sigilant. Today we're going to, as we have National Cybersecurity Awareness Month kicking off tomorrow, we're going to lean into that by debunking a few cybersecurity myths. So we're going to start off with that, and then throughout the course of the webinar, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the Q&A box. We'll also open it up to questions after we, get through some of these cool topics that we're going to cover regarding cybersecurity myths, as well as things that you can do to better protect yourself at home, all in honor of National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which kicks off tomorrow, October 1st. Can't believe September's already over. It went by in the blink of an eye. I mean, hello fall. We're here. All right. So let's dive right in, folks. Ben, you ready for this?
Yeah, I was going to say, just given we have quite a lot of people on, just wondering about questions. I think we're taking them through the Q&A panel in Zoom. So if you have any questions at all and you're not familiar with Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you should see a Q&A box. Feel free to mash that and ask any questions you want at all. And we'll pick up on those just as it's appropriate throughout the webinar. But back to the content. So, Joe?
Yeah, so this, I want to thank you for introducing this to me. I'm just a normal guy. I work at a cybersecurity company, and I love cybersecurity. I love marketing. And I was always under the impression that, you want to have a strong password, nothing, too close to home that someone might be able to crack. And then the best practices was to just change it all the time so that, it can't be cracked because it's always fresh. But, in reality, Ben, that is not the case. So what should folks be doing instead of what I used to do?
It's important with all cybersecurity to consider that a lot of the people in audiences are not experts. As you've said, you say you're just a guy. I think you're pretty good, but you're just a guy who works in a cybersecurity company. But the difficulty is trying to get a complex cybersecurity message across to anyone doesn't work. People get confused. So the message has to be simple. And if we go back 10 years, well, yeah, the message was simple. Use a strong password, which you change frequently. Yeah, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. But the message changes over time, and it's important that we keep up to date with that message. So the simple message, the best message now is use a password manager. Enable two-factor authentication. And the reason for that is because it's got to the point where an 8-character password, particularly if you're changing it frequently, most people, if it's random, are going to forget it. So they start to write it down. They start to share passwords. Inherently, most people, I don't like to use the word lazy, but we are all human, and we do inherently look for the easy option. And the easiest option is use a password manager. A password manager can come up with passwords which are 24-character alphanumeric strings, which nobody's going to guess. You're not going to reuse them anywhere. And just by the law of averages, they will never be reused in the history or future of the human race. That's the level of strength you can get there. And you don't need to remember them. Now, the second and critical part of that is to make sure you're using two-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication in general makes things far, far harder. And personal belief, if the entire security and IT industry mandated and enforced two-factor authentication on every single platform, I would guess the number of account compromises would drop by 99% overnight, literally. And what we're talking about in two-factor authentication, different implementations, the easiest and most likely at the minute is just a simple smartphone running an application. There's a number on it, and the number changes every couple of minutes. And whenever you try to log in, it just asks you for the number that's on the screen of your phone at that time. That's one of the strongest ways and one of the simplest ways, given the capabilities we have. Now, you can push into biometrics, you can push into tokens, RFID cards, a whole lot of other things, but just the action of having two factors means that for somebody to compromise your account, not only do they need to steal your password or guess your password, they also need to steal your phone or compromise your phone or compromise something else. It just radically increases the difficulty of account compromises. And that's a really, really powerful thing. So the message is changing. And the message I would give now versus 10 years ago is make sure to use a password manager and enable two-factor authentication. That's it. And this doesn't just sit in the office in the workplace. This doesn't sit in the corporate environment. Everything, all personal accounts. If you enable two-factor authentication on your banking, the chances that somebody compromises both your desktop computer and your phone at the same time drastically reduced.
Not to go down a rabbit hole here, Ben, but are there ways for criminals to intercept that text message?
Yes, there are always ways, but what we're doing is we're increasing the difficulty. I mean, it's like saying, well, because there are ways to bypass locks on my door, there's no point in having them. Like,
Right.
well, if you have a lock at all, you immediately circumvent or you deter a criminal who's just simply looking for an unlocked door. Now, move on to a criminal who's maybe enabled with lockpicks, who's enabled with lock breaching tools. You need to have a strong lock and a strong door, and it's almost a game of cat and mouse. But the difference is the cat is constantly evolving, and so must the mouse. And sorry to say, folks, we're the mouse in this. So we need to make sure that we are evolving our techniques as time goes on. We're improving constantly, both in terms of our personal practices and also the tooling that we use and the advice we give.
Excellent. All right, let's move on to cybersecurity myth versus reality number 2. So this one, I mean, breaches come up in the news, and the ones that make a lot of noise are the ones that are name brand organizations, names that, you're familiar with, they have commercials, you're seeing them everywhere, big brands, right? Target, for instance, Equifax, and people hear that, and they assume that only big brands are targeted, because why would a criminal want to waste their time on a smaller shop that has less money than a Target? And that thought process is inaccurate. I mean, Ben, let's dive into the reality of it.
Yeah. So when it comes down to it, something like 40% of small businesses have been compromised in the past year with some kind of cyber attack. That's not single figure percentages. That's a good portion of them. And I would push further than that. The reality is that most attacks and most compromises aren't detected for, I think the average is up to like 900 days or something after breach. And given that, although it's 36% reported last year, the number's probably far higher. And from that perspective, the reality is you will be breached. Now, it all comes down to your preparation and what you do whenever you're breached. So preparation up front is absolutely key. Responding to a breach whenever it has happened is like trying to lock the gate after the horses have all bolted. It's too late. While I'm saying that, there's certain measures you can take after the point, they're just far less effective and they cost way more. So putting the right measures in place up front is where to be. And this, again, part of the Cybersecurity Awareness Month, I'm trying to bring this both to the individual, back into the home, into the family, but also the corporate environment. So everybody in the entire organization, every company, every corporation, every employee should know where the IT policies are. And they should know that because they've agreed to them. They've agreed to the usage policies. They have agreed to the corporate security policies as part of their employment with the company. And that's pretty much a table stakes for any business these days, is that absolutely critical. All employees know what the IT corporate policies are. Now, they don't need to know all the implementation details. They don't need to go into the 500 pages of ISO 27001 documentation, but they need to know if you're at home at night and you get a suspicious text message which claims to be from someone in the office and it's unusual, well, what do you do? Who do you tell? If you are in work and you get an email from the CFO asking you to release funds, what do you actually do? Because different companies will handle this in different ways, and it's not that they're valid and invalid ways, it's just they're different to suit business needs. So you need to know what you do whenever something happens, and be that you being the IT manager, and whenever you see a breach, you need to know what your response procedures are in intimate detail, or any employee, right down to, as you say, you're just a guy in marketing. You know, and we had this conversation before the call, you know what our policies are. So you know exactly what to do if somebody sends you an email that's suspicious. You know exactly what to do if, and it does happen, if you click on a link you know you shouldn't have. What's very, very important, that people need to be prepared up front. And that's from every level of the organization, right the way from the guy who opens the door through to the guy who sits in the chair at the top. Everyone needs to know.
Yep.
And this follows on. So I would challenge most people, what do you do if you're hacked at the home? Now, maybe it's just isolated to your home environment, and maybe it doesn't actually touch on your professional life, and it doesn't touch on the businesses you work for. But what would you do, Joe? I mean, if you open your personal laptop, you go to sign on to your page for the football results, and what do you do if you've been breached? And that's a real challenge which everyone needs to consider. Now, direct advice for this really depends on your circumstance, but most people haven't considered that. Most people, and I know this from personal experience, will phone their friend who's in IT, or their friend who's in cybersecurity, and they'll say, hey, what do I do? And I know this because I get maybe 2-3 calls a week from former colleagues or friends or family members. Hey, this thing happened. And that's not a bad response, but it's not going to cover all cases. So it's really important to understand that if something suspicious has happened, you've sort of got two levels when you're at the home. It's, have you been breached? Have you been compromised? Definitely. Or is there suspicion? Sort of those two ways. And if you're lucky enough to have someone like myself, or like you, Joe, to pick up and say, hey, you work in cyber, you know what to do, then great. But most of us don't. Most of us might know one or two people who fix our printer. But it's really important that we have planned in advance how we respond. And the number one thing is, if you know you have been personally compromised or personally breached, local law enforcement. That's my best advice. It is a crime. Depending on where you live and your location, you might get different direction, but it's absolutely critical that you involve local law enforcement. And they may direct you to, depending on what state you're in, they may direct you to different cybercrime units, but effectively reporting that is absolutely critical. It's also important because personal insurance is starting to cover for data protection as well now, particularly personal credit insurance. And so it's important you follow those processes. So if you know you've been breached, like for example, if something funny happens on your computer and 10 seconds later, your 401k is emptied, and then 20 seconds later your bank account's emptied, you know you've been breached, immediately phone the police, immediately phone local law enforcement. That's critical. Now, if you don't know you've been breached, but it's suspicious, if you got a suspicious email, or one of your family members, one of your kids has clicked on something, knowing what to do then, again, is just as important. And for that, if you don't have someone you can rely on, then the best thing you can do is go to the likes of Geek Squad, or Target, or one of the large electronics stores, which will have specific help desks. And if you unplug your computer, if you bring it to them, they're your next best bet if you don't have someone more knowledgeable. But the plan should be, you know in advance what to do. Your kids know what to do. Your partner knows what to do. Because not everyone's so IT savvy. They might click on something, get a warning message, ignore it, and just move on. And then you don't find out until 6 weeks later, when your bank accounts then start to get emptied.
Yeah.
So critical is preparation.
Yeah, I know, most of the audience here is pretty tech savvy. But like, yeah, for your like intimate bubble, like, people in your life, I mean, think to yourself, who is the most tech savvy individual that I know? Don't be afraid to reach out to that person, pick their brain. I mean, yesterday, Ben, I haven't told you this, but I got a voicemail, and it was an automated message saying that there was a warrant out for my arrest. And I obviously panicked, but then I Google searched the number, and like nothing came back. So that led me to believe that it was a hoax. I haven't committed any crimes lately that I'm aware of. So I don't see why there would be a warrant out for my arrest. But like these people, I mean, they're exploring every angle. If that phone call was received by, a not so tech savvy individual, maybe, someone who, might be elderly. I mean, those are the folks that they're going for. So like, if you are tech savvy, be that advocate for other family members or people that are close to you, right? Like empower them with that knowledge and keep them vigilant, because these people aren't giving up. They're getting more and more sophisticated. And, we just have to stay ahead of the eight ball, and be as proactive as we can. But yeah, that was a funny story.
Give some horror stories as well. And again, I was going to say, Joe, I wouldn't have suspected you for a moment, but I
It
support
always
you.
happens to me. It always happens to me. It's so funny. But
And
I'm keen enough to know.
but if horror stories come back, I've had partners who've been approached and have fallen for it. They're not tech savvy. They have fallen for it, and it's only about halfway through the process of them being socially engineered the questions get asked. But another horror story, luckily one that's avoided, is as you can imagine, I'm not just paranoid, but I am hyper vigilant. And if guests come to my home, they're welcome to use my Wi-Fi, but I have a separate VPN for them, and I have a separate isolated network for them. But just the security monitors I have on that have found that an awful lot of people who come and use my Wi-Fi are using compromised laptops.
Really?
They're just compromised. That they're effectively part of botnets, and they didn't know. They don't really care either. As long as they can get on Twitter, as long as they can get on Facebook, as long as they can do what they need to do, they actually don't care. And the irony is that they could be exploited far more deeply if someone decided to. It's really just that they are a low priority target. So,
Like you were saying before, these individuals can lay dormant for up to 900 days.
that number that
Well,
number going up, but I think that's a statistical. I think it's a statistics problem rather than a technical one. But yeah, most breaches aren't found for a long, long time.
that's because they're not making any noise. I mean,
I think that's part of it. Again, I think it's mostly statistics because I think what's happening is a breach occurred but didn't have any impact. So someone got in, but it was maybe an automated scanner or something, and it was just never exploited. And a lot of these tools, I mean, if we look at threat actor groups, they do tend to run campaigns. So it's a concerted effort for a period of time, and then they'll move on, they'll change tools, they'll upgrade, they'll target a different sector. But there's an awful lot of like zombie campaigns floating around, malware that sat in an email for a year, and then for whatever reason, someone was searching for something in their junk mail folder, clicked on it and opens it. And then you've got a malware for a campaign and maybe a bit wallet that's been closed a year ago. It doesn't actually do anything. It doesn't have any direct impact, and then it is later found. So there's an awful lot of different scenarios contribute to that. But what it does show is that an awful lot of the malaction that happens is never caught until significantly after, and that's why it's so important to be vigilant.
yep. So I think the next slide we sort of covered, but there is one more topic that I want to raise on this here, Ben, and you sort of alluded to it. So you were talking about the scans that the threat actors will do. Like they're not sitting there saying, "Oh man, I want to get Murphy Bank in Tulsa, Oklahoma." What they're doing, right, is they're doing this massive wide scan. They don't care who. It's like a fisherman, right, trying to catch a bunch of fish. They might get some like say the fish that they want, but there's going to be other fish in there too, right? So it's like they're not trying to target individual companies. They do this massive net, whatever comes back, and then they reap the benefits of it.
Exactly. I mean, the way to think about threat actors now is to sort of think of them about the same way as you would think about a business, because most of them are now effectively businesses, and you can almost consider them as having an anti-SOC. They've got a team of people, groups of people who are working actively. Now, if you read the news every so often, you'll find that another ring has been busted or another office, but it does occasionally come up where you find entire, what look like legitimate call centers, businesses, IT houses, usually in remote low-cost regions, who are effectively just paid hacker houses. And the employees don't actually really know. I mean, all they're doing is reading a script. All they're doing is working through something. They don't actually really know that it's malicious. So all these things do exist, but they are business driven. They are finance driven. So the money is effectively taken from whatever, and you can get ahead through a number of different ways. And one of them is just be first. So you'll see threat actors trying to get really to exploit the latest stuff most quickly. That's a key one. So you'll see new exploits, new vulnerabilities being grabbed very quickly and weaponized. And there's almost an arms race when they come out. The next one, then you'll see people just trying to do it by scale, such a huge scale. And now you talk about scanners, there's been a sort of a change in behavior over recent years where most threat actors have kind of stopped scanning now because why? Why would you bother scanning for a vulnerability? Just try and exploit it. Because if you just try and exploit it, well, if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, you haven't lost anything. It's quicker. And the other advantage is that if you use scanners, likelihood is your source IPs are going to get blocked or marked as being malicious. So you're better just to straight up exploit. And that means, again, preparation is absolutely key. You need active defenses rather than just scan defense. But yes, coming back, absolutely financially driven. I mean, we found over the recent years, we've seen and found a lot of Bitcoin activity for bit mining. Now, as Bitcoin has started to lose its insane growth and value, people are now moving to other things, and you're starting to see a resurgence of ransomware. You're starting to see a resurgence, particularly of blackmail type techniques, people trying to blackmail people, and likewise with yourself, where you've got that phone call. The likely threat of that would be that either they would try and get you to pay a fine, or they would try and blackmail you. If they think they can blackmail you, then they'll try and blackmail you and say, look, sorry, we're coming for you unless you pay us X amount per month or something. So it's almost a subscription-based cybercrime. So these are the sorts of things we are dealing with. So it is pretty broad, but everybody is a target. And if there's a way to exploit you financially, they will do it sooner or later.
Who's going to return a call from someone saying that there's a warrant out for their arrest? I mean, I'm not returning that call if there was one.
No, this happens all the time. There are, if you look at I can't remember the name of it, but there was a ring busted recently. I think it was Southeast Asia, somewhere in Southeast Asia. And there was a ring busted who were literally doing that, and all of their logs were captured. The place was raided. They got recordings of all of these calls. Where literally people do phone back and say, hey, look, I'm really, really sorry. I didn't know. What do I need to do? So it absolutely does happen. Yeah. And they wouldn't be doing it if it didn't work. So the initial attacks are just phishing. But I mean, once they find something that works, they'll exploit it. And the reason they call you is because it works sometimes. And it is worth them having a call center somewhere. Yeah. Absolutely worth having a call center with a team of people to phone endless phone numbers, saying that in the hope that they get someone gullible. And the return doesn't need to be that high. I mean, you only need to get 1 in 10,000 people.
No, what is it, 6 billion people on this planet?
Yeah. There's another sucker.
If you get a fraction of that, you're rolling in dough.
Yeah, that's it.
So, all right, let's move along just to some best practices, you guys. So we're going to move off the topic of myth versus reality. And also keep in mind, if you guys have any questions, just, throw them in the Q&A and we'll address them as we go. So I love this. If it's connected, protect it. So everything is going digital. I mean, I have a hard time putting my, phone down. It's like glued to my hand, and I'm not alone in that. Everybody is connected, whether they, like it or not. I don't know what the stat is, but I think it's like 2 devices per person, something like that. And then they're coming out with like smart refrigerators. The car is turning into a computer. I mean, it's not going to stop. You get smart light bulbs. Everything's connected, right? All in an effort to make it easier for you. And that is an absolute playground for cyber criminals. So let's dive into this topic a little bit, Ben. What can folks do at home to ensure that they're staying vigilant, they're doing the best that they possibly can with the resources at hand?
It's similar to what I said at the start. This is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and most of the advice, most of the best practices from a corporate level, they translate into the home. Not necessarily one for one, but the objectives are the same. Just keep yourself safe. And from one of our previous webinars, we talked about the importance of covering the basics or doing the basics well, and that comes into the home as well. So the first thing I would say is know what you have. Just know what you have. And whoever is, let's go with the head of IT for the household, whether it be tech mom or tech dad or college IT graduate, whatever it is, whoever's got that job, make sure it's clear, make sure who owns it. In the same way as someone's responsible for taking the garbage out, someone's responsible for, I don't know, cleaning the car, make it clear who owns it, because someone has to, and if nobody owns it, no individual owns it, nobody owns it, or if everybody owns it, nobody owns it. So make it clear who owns it, and make it clear what do we have in the home right now. Now, again, from my paranoid background, obviously I can tell you every single device which is on my network and exactly what it is, usually from the MAC address. But that means I can tell you right now, I've got a number of Amazon devices, I've got some Google devices, I have about 200 or 300 smart IoT devices. They're all on Zigbee, but they're still effectively connected to the same network. And then computing resources, servers, etc. And I know what every single thing is. And the minute something appears that isn't known, well, I get an alert on my phone and I think I'll work out what it is. But it does every so often happen. But you need to know what's in your environment. First up, what do you have? Do you have Amazon? Do you have Google? Is everything you have a known big brand that you can trust? Is it Dell? Is it Microsoft? Is it Android? Is it Google smartphone? Is it something like that? Or on the other hand, do you tend to buy a lot of stuff from AliExpress, particularly low-cost networking equipment? Do you buy that Wi-Fi extender that was only $3 from Target, or do you buy? I'm not suggesting anyone on the call does, and please don't identify yourself; it could be incriminating. Do you buy a Kodi box? A Kodi box that lets you get all the TV channels and not pay for them? Well, if you do, you're buying risk. And myself and the people that I work with, sometimes we buy things like this on purpose just to see what they do. We put them into a really nice sandbox and just watch them try and compromise stuff. And an awful lot of the low-cost devices you'll buy will do that. Now that's assuming that it's intentional. And this is off Amazon. I'm not talking if you're going to AliExpress and back channels. From Amazon, you can buy a Kodi box, which will act as a Tor exit node, not with your permission, it just does it. It'll use your home network as a Tor exit node, and it'll use that device as part of a botnet. So we've bought those commercial. That's just how they come. They haven't been compromised. They come like that, pre-compromised. You also need to watch, particularly with home devices. A lot of them are designed to be easy to use. But easy to use and secure aren't necessarily in the same ballpark. And so with easy to use devices, they typically have very, very weak default passwords. So if you're buying, say, an IKEA smart home hub for light bulbs, up until about 6 months ago, a year ago, they all came with a default admin password, and they all had remote connections that you could exploit. So if you exploited that, you can effectively control someone else's lights. Now, maybe there's more depth of exploitation, but that's the sort of thing you need to watch for, particularly home routers if you're buying cheap networking equipment, because I know you guys have limitations with your choice of internet provider. But let's say they want to charge you $500 and you can buy one for $100. All right, but where's it coming from? Can you trust it? Can you trust it's not compromised? Can you trust it's not easy to compromise? So number one, know what you have, know what your security is. Number two, know who is responsible in the household for it. And if someone buys a device, much like knowing what to do if you think you've been breached, if someone buys a new thing, it should be known in your household that everybody needs to report to whoever is responsible and tell them, look, I've bought a new games console, I've got a new IoT device, rather than just connect things blindly. Does that cover it?
Yeah. And what about like old devices? So say, you upgrade your phone and you don't trade it in, or you get a new laptop and you put your old laptop on a shelf to collect dust. Do folks have to worry about any of that stuff, or if it's like off, it's okay?
No, you need to worry about it to an extent. Now, there's a couple of reasons why you want to worry about it. You can't necessarily control what's going to happen to it for the entire future as it sits in that drawer. Now, we could talk about this from an e-waste perspective, where you don't want sort of junk sitting around your house. You're going to need to get rid of it eventually, and the more of it there is, the more likely it is that the neat freak in the house is just going to throw it all in a skip. And if it goes in a skip, you don't know what will happen to it. Now,
Yeah.
if you look at a responsible technology owner, it is a life cycle. There's got to be an exit plan. You can't just buy stuff continuously, despite some of us maybe trying and our partners objecting loudly. So we do need to have an exit strategy. For myself, there are devices that I have no clear way to destroy them. So what I do is I keep them in a box until I find a way to flash melt them. Let's go with put them in a big burner with some thermite and melt a hole in them. That's maybe a bit extreme for the average human. So what I would suggest is the recycling schemes from known providers are a great way of doing this. For example, if you have an Apple store and you have old Apple devices, they'll take them for free and they'll recycle them. And you get a piece of paper that says, we guarantee to wipe your data. So you're relatively safe with that. Now, there are also, again, depends on whether you trust them, local stores which will recycle technology. They'll take out your hard disks, they'll take out your solid state memory, they'll throw it through a grinder and turn it all into powder. That's great as well. And usually you get a nice certificate with it. But other electronics, like smart devices and things, they're a little bit more worrying because I think there was an attack recently where it wasn't IKEA smart bulbs, it was somebody's smart light bulbs contained in the flash memory your passwords to your Wi-Fi. So they were Wi-Fi enabled light bulbs. And whenever you threw them out, if you pulled it and plugged it in over a micro USB, you could just read the password for Wi-Fi off it. So this was an attack which was used in somewhere. But looking at those sorts of things, yeah, you do need to be careful. You really need to make sure your e-waste is responsibly destroyed, not for the environment, but for your own personal security.
Also for the environment too, right? Yeah, I know. At least in the town that I live in, they have monthly electronic dumps, or where they, I would imagine, probably dispose of the devices. So I would encourage you to check your local municipality to see if you guys have anything like that. Awesome. So Ben, I think this next.
Sorry, Joe, I was going to say from a corporate perspective as well. I know we're trying to make this slightly to all-encompassing for Cybersecurity Awareness Month, but from a corporate perspective, again, having a disposal policy is absolutely critical. Now, nobody is perfect, and we are not perfect as well. We have that big pile, and the big pile is well known as the stuff that it has to be disposed of at some point in the future. But really having a plan for that on an ongoing basis is critical, and knowing what you have. Not only is it critical to know what you have to protect right now, you need to know what you're going to have to dispose of. So whether that be pulling hard disks and drilling holes in them, throwing them into an industrial grinder, or mag wiping them, or whatever it is, know how you're going to dispose of your old equipment.
Or smelting them. I think that sounds like the winner.
I don't think that's very safe, although again, I don't say I have done it. It does work.
Then you can repurpose it.
No.
All right, so this one is also sort of in vein with the last one, but you also alluded to this, and this is what I wanted to address here. It's the fact that these devices come pre-built or preloaded with login information. So like, you get your Wi-Fi set up, Comcast or Verizon or what have you, drops off your router, and then there's that long code on the back. Now it's up to you to change that password. So, if you're not aware, I mean, I remember growing up trying to get onto the internet to play some games back in the day. If, I ever forgot the Wi-Fi password, I would have to go to the box, turn it over and ask my mom, which one of these long numbers is the password? And then she would probably like go to her little sticky note that has the password on it. And now looking back, I'm just like, oh, and that's probably what the majority of people do.
Yeah, well, now you can look forward to her going to the password manager after she watches it.
She's stepped her game up big time.
Yeah.
Dude, she used to have her password as our dog's first name and house address number. It was like that was her email too. So the email was the email and the password. And I was just like, once I started working in cyber, I was like, Mom, you need to wake up.
It's far too easy to guess those sorts of things. And we need to remember that the things guessing aren't necessarily people anymore. People use tools, password cracking tools, which use not threat intelligence, but target intelligence. I mean, it's too easy to crack those sorts of things with just a little bit of knowledge about you.
A little digging is all it takes. Just find someone's Facebook page or anything, and
I think we covered this one a little bit in the previous slide, and apologies, but I know you changed some of the slides around, so I'm talking ahead. But I'm going to play on here home.
This is sort of the accumulation of everything that we talked about. So it comes down to being prepared, right? So it's like if it's pouring rain out like it was a couple minutes ago here, you take an umbrella unless you want to get soaked, right? So, the same approach goes to cybersecurity and how to better protect yourself and how to, stay vigilant, protect those that you love, those close to you, around you. But yeah, I mean, Ben, we covered each of these topics in our previous slides. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add, or if, you think it might be a good time to open it up to questions. What do you think?
I'm always happy to take questions. Other than that, I think we've covered everything we wanted to for today.
Yeah, I'm excited for Cybersecurity Awareness Month kicking off tomorrow. So we'll end the share. Thanks for sitting through our slides. I hope it wasn't death by PowerPoint. We definitely don't like doing that here. We like to keep it engaged and keep the audience, engaged in the conversation. So then let's open it up to some questions. Anything that's top of mind for the folks here?
So there's one or two in here which I know you're going to address.
Yeah.
Often. I don't think they're there for this particular webinar. Okay, so looking at the question that we got about the current situation with COVID and how that's affecting cybersecurity. So this is more of an update on some of our previous webinars. So the key update is that we're headed, particularly in the UK and other regions globally, for a cold winter, and we're headed for a lot more lockdown type measures to try and keep on top of things. This isn't going to end quickly. And from that perspective, updating our previous iteration, back then when we were speaking at the beginning of this, back in March, April time, we talked about a lot of people moving and changing how they worked, the new normal. So a lot of VPN activity, an awful lot of organizations doubling, tripling, quadrupling their VPN activity in a very short space of time. But what we're starting to see now is that this, in terms of a work from home sense, isn't going away quickly. And again, I can speak to the UK government advice. I haven't quite followed the US advice, but the UK advice is we're going back to, if you can work from home, do. Unless there's a strong reason you can't work from home, don't come in.
Yeah.
And that's a change in the past week or two. Now that's really important to note that, because what it means to us is that we have got a long-term plan which we're executing, which will effectively enable people to work from home pretty much as long as we need to. So the stop gaps we put in place, now is the time to go back and reassess those. And at the time we'd suggested, first, number one, just operations. If your business collapses, it doesn't matter how secure you are, but doing that balanced against your security, not taking undue risks, and making your backlog, making it really clear of the list of things you need to go and fix. So now is probably the time to revisit your migration plan. Make sure that the things that you knew you were going to be risks in the future, you now start to address item by item.
Excellent. So, question here from Steve, Ben. So Steve asks, what is one, I think it's in regards to the password manager. Mm-hmm. Do you have any recommendations for a password manager?
Loads. So it depends what you're trying to do. If it's just for websites, which a lot of people it is, if it's just for apps, then you can use either Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge's built-in password managers. I think there's one in Firefox as well. So that covers you well enough for online type web access. Now, the key thing is that if you're using the Microsoft one, it is tied to your Microsoft account. If you're using the Google one, it's tied to your Google account. If you're using Firefox's, it might not be cloud backed. You want to be careful you don't lose all your passwords. So you need to make sure it's got a backup mechanism to it. If that's not what you're looking for, if you're looking for something bigger, you have a couple of choices as well. You can go for something like KeePass. KeePass is more of a password vault. So you can use it to store all your passwords, but again, it is just local and it comes out as a file. It's a KBX file, I think it is. So make sure you keep that in cloud storage. Make sure you have that in your Google Drive, or make sure you have that in your OneDrive. If you lose that file, game over. But when you're securing that, you should use two-factor authentication, including your phone, and you should also use a strong, long password for that you won't forget.
Passphrase, right?
Passphrase are pretty good, yeah. Just mix it up, different capitals, symbols, numbers, mix it up a bit. Other than that, there's other services such as LastPass, which is particularly strong. I think LastPass is a subscription-based service. They're not free anymore, but LastPass is really good because it'll cover all of them. It doesn't matter if you're talking about the password for your Netflix account or the password for your laptop or the password for anything else. And it extends really well into the corporate environment as well. And there's really good partnerships there.
Awesome. All right. Cool. I hope that answered your question, Steve. All right, guys, we're coming up to 45 minutes, so I want to thank everyone for attending today. Ben, excellent job. Thank you so much. And keep a lookout, folks, for some additional content throughout the month of October related to Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So if you're not following us on social already, I would encourage you to follow us on all of our social channels for all things cybersecurity. Takeaway for this meeting for all attendees, we're going to be forwarding you guys some Cybersecurity Awareness Month posters, flyers that you all can share internally. You can, put them up as your background on your computer, print them out, hang them up, and yeah, just remember to stay vigilant out there, folks. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Just drop us a line on our website, or you could shoot us an email directly. My email is jmurphy@sigilant.com. With that, I'll let you all get back to your day. Thank you very much.